Three Christians, one a proud Christian nationalist, one a young moderate, and one who says conservatives have hijacked Christianity for their own malicious ends. This is Andrew Wilson, the host of The Crucible, John Fugelsang, author of Separation of Church and Hate, unpacking extremist politics, religion, and the urgent struggle for a compassionate America, and the host of The Isabel Brown Show on Daily Wire and a close friend of Charlie Kirk, Isabel Brown. Well, welcome to all three of you. Andrew Wilson, Donald Trump came out over the weekend and called this latest attack on the church in Michigan an attack on Christians in a post on his Truth Social platform. We don't actually know, as things stand, whether that was the motivation. We know that the suspect who died in all this was a former US Marine, Thomas Jacob Sanford, and he had been pictured wearing a Trump T-shirt with the slogan, "Make liberals cry again," which may be an indication that he wasn't anti-Trump. We just don't know, as things stand, what his motivation was for this. As so often with these kind of incidents, I always think it's prudent to take a beat and just try and see if more information comes out as to why he may have done this. But Trump has gone out there on the attack, as he often does, and said, this is an attack on Christians. What do you feel?
Well, I mean, Trump is just following the trends. We remember what happened with Charlie Kirk when progressives tried to paint him as some right-wing graper. Turns out that that was all complete and total lies. They were doing damage control. They tried to paint him out to be a right-winger, clear up until it became irrefutable that he was not anymore. And then they just changed the narrative again. So Trump is just following the trends. It is the case that Christians are persecuted in the United States, have been for a long time. And they're going to continue to be. That's kind of our cross to bear. We were told that that was going to be the case. In fact, that's part of what being a Christian is. As to Trump following the trends and making the assumption, do I kind of agree that you should have caution on these things? I do, but I can completely understand why it would be that he would have that reaction.
John Fugelsang, Benny Johnson posted about this attack on the church in Michigan. If a mosque was shut up every month, it would be a crisis for Muslims. If a synagogue was shut up every month, it would be a crisis for Jews. If a temple was shut up every month, it would be a crisis for Hindus. Christians, this is happening to us. Christianity is under attack. It's time to get serious about it. What's your response to that?
I keep hoping that one of these preventable attacks will inspire our Christian friends on the right to want to make it a little bit harder for unstable white men to easily get weapons that are designed to kill lots of people really fast. I really hoped after the awful murder of Mr. Kirk that some of our friends on the right would agree that maybe it's far too easy for unstable 20-something males to get their hands on hardware and pop off and murder people at a political rally.
He was using an antique rifle, dude. He was using, he was using an antique rifle.
I know.
An antique bolt.
It was unsecured.
Legislation?
I didn't interrupt you once, my friend. I didn't interrupt you one time.
What legislation do you think would have even been passed that would have prevented
if his grandfather had been obliged to keep, if his grandfather had been legally obliged to keep his gun secured at home, that shooting wouldn't have happened, and the Sandy Hook shooting would not have happened.
You can't even demonstrate that's true. For all you know, the kid has the safe code.
You're not letting me finish, and you've interrupted me twice now. Piers, the deal is right-wing Christianity in America has been suckered, and you're really going to... I'm going to answer Piers's question, my friend. I didn't interrupt you. Right-wing Christianity in America has been suckered for a very long time into aligning with power and authority instead of challenging it as Christ did. Donald Trump didn't get the love of evangelicals by promising to do a damn thing Jesus commanded of us. Right-wing Christianity does not fight for the things Jesus commanded and taught us to do. Right-wing Christianity fights for conservative Christian power over every level of society. They do not fight to welcome the stranger, as Christ commands in Matthew 25 and as God commands throughout the Old Testament. They do not fight for individuals and nations to care for the sick and the poor, as commanded by Christ in the judgment of nations. They fight for right-wing conservative Christian power, and America is suffering from a gun plague where children are now killed by guns more than disease, more than they are killed by car accidents. And I keep praying this is exactly the sort of situation where a religion based on love and empathy will come to our rescue. And yet, our conservative Christian friends are locked in this mindset that somehow personal freedoms matter more than the lives of Americans.
Isabel, you've been pulling... hang on, let Andrew, I'll come back to you, but let Isabel react, because you've been pulling a lot of faces as you were listening to that.
Yeah, you know, Piers, I was on with you the day that Charlie was shot, actually. We were talking about the murder of Irina Zarutska on the train in Charlotte, and I was very baffled by what I was hearing then. Nothing could have prepared me for the slew of attack against anyone who is a conservative Christian in America the last 30 seconds. There is not a single gun law on the books that would have prevented Charlie Kirk from being assassinated at a gun-free zone on the campus of Utah Valley University. When we saw the manifesto published to YouTube about the shooter at the Annunciation Catholic School in Minneapolis, you saw a very specific, detailed attack that was specifically against Christian children and their families, really warping in a very twisted demonic sense the mass with engravings and diary entries saying, "This is my body." I mean, we were watching a very coordinated attack going back to the Nashville shooting and to many other attacks on churches across the country over the past few years, of which there have been more than 500 attacks on Catholic churches in the United States in the last 5 years or so. This is clearly a specific attack against Christianity in America, but let's pretend that it's not just about America for a second, because the truth is it's not. Christianity, by the numbers, is by far and large the most persecuted religion on the face of the planet today. In Nigeria, just a few days ago, more than 60 people were killed using hammers and machetes after attending mass at a Catholic church there in Nigeria. And I read a study the other day, feel free to fact check me on this, to any of the other panelists, that more Christians have been slaughtered in Nigeria for being Christian in the last few years than Palestinians have been killed in Gaza during the midst of the Israeli-Gaza war. But you don't see any protests happening in the United States about that today. So it's ridiculous to try to create a left versus right paradigm here, or some sort of attack against the Republican Party, when there very clearly is a manifestation of spiritual warfare and demonic satanic influence in our society trying to attack Jesus Christ in America today.
Andrew, I want to play a clip.
I'm not a Democrat.
I'm going to let Andrew respond here. Chris Hedge, a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, said on the Secular Talk podcast that Charlie Kirk's assassination was being used to create a new martyr for the movement of Christian nationalism, which he said is a backdoor to American fascism. Let's take a look.
When fascism comes to America, it won't be with swastikas and jackboots, and it will be with the Christian cross and mass recitations of the Pledge of Allegiance. You really got a glimpse of that in the rally in Arizona or rally, whatever you want to call it, the memorial service for Kirk.
Now, Andrew, two questions for you. One is, what is your understanding of what Christian nationalism is? And as a Christian nationalist, are you concerned that it gets hijacked by people who may genuinely be white supremacists, fascists, and so on?
Well, not really. So the idea of Christian nationalism is just that Christians remain the culturally dominant force in the United States. That's it. That's the entire proposition. Everything else is an addition. So the gentleman over here, for instance, a quick question for you. Is Jesus Christ God?
I believe so, but I don't believe in imposing my opinions on others.
Okay, got you. So Jesus Christ is God. So all the religions are false?
No, I don't believe that at all. I believe in my house there are many mansions, and I believe God has many ways of the truth.
Yeah,
I don't think I'm better than anyone because Christ's movement is about humility. Christ's movement is not about public domination and power.
I just want to make sure I got this right. Are all other religions false?
I don't believe that at all, no. And I don't believe right-wing Christianity is true either.
Is Islam
right-wing Christianity does not...
Answer my question, dude.
MAGA
is Islam
does
true?
not fight for the teachings of Christ.
Is Islam true? Is Islam true?
Islam believes in the same God as Christians. Do you believe we should welcome the stranger as God and Christ command, or do you believe in Donald Trump?
Wait, they believe Jesus Christ is God?
It's not my religion. They believe Christ is a prophet.
So then it's
the Virgin
false.
Mary is mentioned more in the Holy Quran than she's mentioned in the Bible.
I'm going to walk you through the logic here. If Jesus Christ is God,
what are the Christ teachings that Trump fights for, my friend?
Then it is the case.
What are the gospel teachings your movement fights for? Your movement uses Christ as a prop, and you legislate against his commands.
Stop filibustering.
Dude, you interrupted
me. Your question. So I was in the middle of it. I asked you a single question and was getting to the follow-up, and you go on these long diatribes.
You asked two questions.
Listen to what I'm saying.
You asked two questions, my friend.
Logically, if it's the case that Jesus Christ is God, and that is true, then Islam has to be false, and you have to proclaim that that is the case as a follower of Christ.
Yes, too bad the founding fathers didn't have that system in our country.
Well, the thing that's so funny is that you say that you're a progressive Catholic. You're worried about Christians in power. You say that Christians are out here. Oh, Andrew, Christians are out here. They should be looking at these other immigrants as religious refugees. That's what you said, your own words.
They're actually Christian refugees. At our border, they are Christian refugees that y'all have been socialized to call illegal.
Then how How come you lobbied for Kamala Harris, raised money for the Harris campaign's Democrat operative, when she said that she wanted staunch border policies? She literally went to Guatemala and said, "You're not allowed to come. Do not come."
I know she did. I'm not a Democrat, my friend. I'm not a Democrat. Her policies cause less harm than Trump's.
You happen to be a Democrat operative.
Her policies cause less harm than Trump's, my friend. And her policies were closer to the actual teachings of Christ than Trump. Let me ask you.
Then that would be the exact same logic that we would have.
May I respectfully ask you one question? Can I ask you one question?
You're such a hypocrite, by the way.
Will you please? May I please ask you one question now that you've asked me so many? And now that you've called me names, dude, hit the other cheek. I can take it. Call me more names. I want to ask you something. Please tell me one actual gospel commandment or teaching of Christ.
Complete fraud.
Please tell me one actual gospel. Please tell us all and the viewers watching one actual gospel commandment or teaching of Christ that the MAGA movement fights for. Not what conservative Christians like. Something Christ, who is a mascot to this movement, actually commanded of us. Chapter and verse, if you can.
Sure.
Welcome the stranger. Individuals and nations take care of the poor. Stop executing people. Your movement.
Do you want me to answer?
Or are you going to answer the question then?
Please do.
Do you want me to answer, or
Please
are you going to answer? So the truth of the matter is that if you're really as concerned with the poor as you claim, you would be all about the MAGA movement, who's trying to stop job-crushing immigration
of the poor
to the United States. I'm giving it to you. Calm down.
Christ commands us to welcome the stranger.
Calm down so I can answer your question, lunatic. I'm going to answer it precisely. Here's how it works. If it is the case that you make these bold claims like you do in your book, that Christians ought to be paying taxes for the poor so that we could, for the poor, we got to give it all to the poor. That's what your view is.
That's not my suggestion, bro. That's Jesus' suggestion.
Then it would be the case. That you would not want these job-crushing waves of mass migration coming to the United States, which displace the poor.
Andrew, just one.
They displace the poor.
Give me one teaching of Christ.
I just explained to you that
if it's the case, of Christ you fight for.
I just did. I just explained to you, if you really want to uplift the poor, you don't do it with crushing mass migration.
What Jesus teaching did you explain?
I just explained to you that by your view of what Christians ought to be doing, we are doing it. Do you not understand this?
Christ says that individuals and nations will be judged. Christ says in Matthew 25 that individuals and nations will be judged, heaven or hell, by how they care for the sick, care for the poor, welcome the stranger, and care for those in prison. MAGA legislates and votes against these commandments of Jesus.
And what was the Kamala Harris? What was the Kamala Harris Christian doctrine that you were for?
Kamala Harris is closer by light years to the teachings of Christ than the Republican Party, but I don't consider the Democrats to be. I'm not a Democrat. Where you on the treatment of immigrants, on anti-racism, on women's equality, on helping the poor, on making health care more accessible, on having less gun violence. I could do it all day, my friend.
All right, Isabel.
So was that the epistle made it up? Jesus said, "Thou shalt not have guns."
Gentlemen, let the lady on the panel talk, please. Isabel.
Piers, I think this is precisely the problem, because it just goes to show how in Western society today we are living in two completely alternate realities, largely based on the media that we are consuming, where you genuinely see this belief parroted among very mainstream Christians that the teachings and the policies of someone like Kamala Harris, who actively told Christians at her own rally, "You folks are at the wrong rally, please leave, there is no place for you here," that her policy would have been better for the United States of America. This is a woman who championed the abortion of more than 1 million babies per year in the United States of America, including through all 9 months of pregnancy and partial birth abortion, which is
Bible's not against abortion.
What we believe in the sanctity of life, especially as the Catholic Church. I should know myself, and maybe it's time to crack open a catechism to remind ourselves of that.
Abortions are legal and free in Israel right now. Judaism doesn't ban them.
Promoting actual immigration policy
from that
centers
very Christian nation of Israel.
And when it comes to centering immigration policy,
Christ's religion doesn't ban abortion.
It starts with stopping the horrifying human trafficking of children and the rape of babies and toddlers that happens on the southern border every day. When it starts by lifting people out of poverty, it starts by giving people actual positions of employment that give them a long-term trajectory for financial success. These are Christian values, but our twisted, disgusting media in America and beyond has allowed for a very inverse reaction from Christians to believe in this version of toxic empathy where we are supposed to tolerate and endorse evil and call that following Christ. And I think the last few weeks have been a really powerful example for Christians around the world to realize we no longer can tolerate demonic evil in the spiritual warfare.
How did you feel, Isabel? Isabel, how did you, just on that point, how did you feel when at Charlie Kirk's memorial, his widow, Erica, made an incredibly powerful announcement of forgiving the killer of her husband. But then Donald Trump followed and said he hates his enemies and is still trying to work on the forgiveness bit. What did you feel? As a Christian, what did you feel about that, the two exchanges?
Yeah, sure. If you listen to the president's full speech, he goes on to laugh about that, and it clearly was delivered as a joke. I'm not here to speak for the president.
Oh, no, I think he meant it.
But I
don't think he was
say,
joking.
just based on every single speech that was given at that event other than the president's, and if you took the time to watch all 6 hours of it, you can see this was not a rah, right-wing political rally. Every single speaker, including President Trump, took their time on stage to spread the gospel, to share love of God, to say we can no longer be afraid of proclaiming our faith in the world based on potential political backlash. And I saw one particular take that really bothered me from Destiny, who I know has been a common guest here on the Piers Morgan show, of people saying, you know, this was indicative of a Nazi rally. This was completely indistinguishable from a Nazi rally led by Adolf Hitler. I don't know the last time a Nazi rally encouraged you to forgive your enemies and the people who violently assassinate your husband.
Well, also
only one speaker did.
Well, hang on, just to be clear, also there were a lot of Jewish people at this so-called Nazi rally, which a bit like the Madison Square Garden rally before the election, when they tried to call that the new version of the 1938 rally at MSG, was completely absurd. There was actually a Holocaust survivor sitting in the front row. Let me come back on this issue, if I may, John, to your book and your interpretation of Christian nationalism. I want to just quote the definition that you give of it on page 20 of your book. At its core, Christian nationalism is the belief that the United States was founded as a Christian nation and should remain one today, with laws and policies guided by a particular vision of Christianity. Unlike ordinary religious faith, which is personal and spiritual, Christian nationalism is political. It merges national identity with religious identity, insisting to be a true American is to be a true Christian and vice versa. I suppose what I would say to that is, America historically has been a Christian country. 62% of Americans today are Christian, which is nearly 2/3 of the country.
90% in the 90s.
Yeah, but my point being that it is still a large majority Christian nation. So
yes, it is. And yet they constantly are under siege.
The idea that all of them are being political by identifying as Christian nationalists.
Didn't say that.
No, I'm just saying,
Didn't
if you extrapolate your statement that the Christian nationalism is political, all those people would identify, I would think, as Christian nationalists, right?
About 30% of the country identifies with the main traits of Christian nationalism, and yet they make up 2/3 of the Supreme Court. But it is a very powerful movement that seeks to insert a very narrow, again, Christ-free version of Christianity onto every level of our government. The Founding Fathers were very thorough about this. Our official religion is all and or none. And if you are fighting against other religions because you think you're superior because of Jesus, then you don't actually follow Jesus, because his entire movement was about humility, uplifting the less fortunate, fighting for the marginalized, not total right-wing domination of politics or the school board. Again, I don't see any actual teachings of Christ that the right wing fights for. The only thing Donald Trump and Jesus have in common is they both spent a lot of time around hookers and they both use ghostwriters.
Andrew, Andrew, let me just ask you a question, which is this.
Happy to talk about Scripture, by the way. Happy to talk about what Christ actually says versus Republican policies.
Me too.
Okay, Andrew, my question for you would be this. Under Christian nationalism, what happens to Jews, Muslims, Hindus, atheists? I mean, what happens to those people if the identity of the United States is to be a Christian nationalist country? Then where does that leave people who don't identify as Christian nationalists?
Yeah, same thing that happens when you have state religions in nations right now. Nothing. So there's Western nations, people forget about this, that have churches. They actually have the church of whatever the nation is. And guess what? You're still free to pray how you want. Guess what? Here in the United States, when it was 95% Christian, identified 95% as Christian, you can still be a Jew. You can still
and yet they're under siege, right? They're persecuted, right?
That would be a bonus in our favor that we're not doing the persecuting, doofus. So the thing is, it's so funny here. It's like even when we have full spectrum, even when we have full spectrum dominance, Jesus called people vipers like you. Even when we have full spectrum dominance in culture,
he was calling out the conservative religious bosses when he did that, my friend.
We are far better and leadership capacities than secular atheists are. Guys like this, their entire
you should be in power,
against,
right?
Power
for the Christian, yes, power above others.
The entire crux of what you want is
just
gay sex, right? Isn't that really what your criticism is?
No, sir. You're lying about me because the argument makes you uncomfortable.
What are you upset?
No, sir.
What are you upset about cultural Christians for? What are you actually upset about here?
If Christians are in power,
to follow the what do you think's going to happen to you? What do you think's going to happen to you if Christians are in power? What?
I think that the founding fathers were very specific more than once and said in the Treaty of Tripoli, ratified by Washington, signed by Adams, the government of the United States is in no way founded on the Christian religion. I don't consider your movement to be of Christ, my friend. I don't consider your movement to be of Christ.
Okay, look, if everyone talks at the same time, I can promise you. Hang on.
Trump's trying to ban an entire religion from entering the country, my friend.
If everyone talks at the same time, I can guarantee you one thing: nobody can understand.
Terrorists from entering the country.
No one will understand what anyone says if you all talk over each other.
Sir.
Please, guys, if you talk over each other, no one can hear a word you're all saying. Isabel.
The founding fathers were actually quite clear that you were expected to understand a working knowledge of submission to God in order to be an active participant in governance in the United States. Of the 13 original states, all of them, every single original state constitution of the 13 states required a declaration of faith to serve in the state government. 9 of them required you to have a declaration of faith as a Christian to serve in the state government. The Declaration
of Independence. And yet the U.S. Constitution forbids it.
Our relationship to God.
It refers it to the 10th Amendment. Have you heard of the 10th Amendment?
And they had a better
The First Amendment forbids a religious test.
All right, let Isabel finish her point, then I'll come to the others.
In fact, the book of Deuteronomy is the most quoted book in America's founding documents by leaps and bounds, more than any secular text. So the very foundation of the United States of America was indeed to be one nation under God, a Christian nation.
But the founding fathers also wanted to have a separate... Hang on. The founding fathers also wanted to have a clear separation between church and state for the United States, didn't they?
Not really. They
okay, well, that's interesting. So, Andrew, am I not right in assuming that, Andrew?
You're not right in assuming that. They didn't want an establishment clause at the federal level for a national religion. States were allowed to have their own religions, and they did. They did have their own religions. She's absolutely right. You couldn't vote in many of the states unless you declared that you were part of the faithful. Like, this is just all revisionist history. We have the 10th Amendment, which says that if these powers are not given to the United States government, they go to the prospective states. The states had their own religious institutions. Mr. Viper over here is a complete liar, always has been. And his book, he's full of it.
The concept of the separation of church and state in our founding documents.
Same name Jesus said.
It's not hard to say, Andrew. It's not very Christian. It's not very Christian to keep hurling personal insults at another person on the panel, is it?
Well, then take it up with Jesus. He called guys like this.
I don't remember Jesus saying, "Thou shalt go out and call everyone you don't like a doofus."
Vipers.
He did. He called them vipers all the time. I don't know what to tell you. He did.
He called conservative religious authorities those words.
The people who are trying to utilize rigorism against Christians, it would be exactly who Christ would call vipers.
I'm using Jesus against hypocrites.
All right, let me ask John. All right, hang on. Don't all talk at the same time, please. John, let me ask you this. You believe that Christian nationalism is against the American Constitution. Why?
Because the founders were very specific about not wanting to have an official state religion. Our official religion is all and or none. The problem is the movement of Christian nationalism is as against the Bill of Rights as they are against the actual teachings of Jesus, which is why you will never see our right-wing friends fighting to put any Jesus quotes on any buildings. Jesus never mentions abortion. God asserts that a fetus is property in Exodus 21, that a woman's life has more value in his eye. God gives abortion tips for pregnant, unfaithful wives in Numbers chapter 5. That's why abortion's not banned in Jesus' religion. And that's why God and Jesus and Moses and Paul and the prophets never once condemn ending pregnancies or say what the penalty for ending a pregnancy should be. Am I saying Jesus was pro-abortion? No. What I'm saying is for 45 years in my country, Piers, right-wing Christians have been groomed to prioritize something Christ never talked about and then vote against all the things he actually commanded. Jesus was against the death penalty more than once, not a fan of killing the sinner, never mentioned abortion, and yet And yet, you can't run for office as a Republican unless you want to criminalize abortion, have the government force citizens to be pregnant against their will, pretend that comes from Jesus, and also think Jesus was wrong about not executing people.
Isabel, I get the feeling you don't entirely agree.
No, not one iota of me agrees with that statement, Piers, and nor
Where
should
does the
any
Bible
good
ban it?
in Scripture. It starts with a very simple commandment in the 10 Commandments: "Thou shalt not murder." Let's take off our Catholic hats for a
Judaism
second
does
and put on
not
our
consider a
science
fetus to be a
hats,
full life.
which are not
Abortions are
mutually
legal and
exclusive.
free in
I
Israel
have
right now.
degrees in biomedical sciences, and science is unequivocally clear that human life begins at conception. There is a genetically unique individual
The Bible
who has never
disagrees.
before and will never exist again, that is a living organism. And if that species is in fact a human being, which it is, it should be required that we give that person the same dignity, respect, and human rights of any other person on earth. This is this toxic empathy twisting concept of the American church that has been hijacked by left-wing politics, where you can look at a human being waving at you on an ultrasound, just like my daughter did at 11 weeks old, where I could count every single bone in her hand.
As did my son.
Tell you that the death penalty should be outlawed from society because human beings should have rights
Jesus
and dignity.
said that.
Also look at a baby and tell you that that child is worthy of literal human sacrifice. It is disgusting to me.
Okay, Andrew.
And I'm just saying that the Bible never bans it. Jesus bans the death penalty. This is a movement that doesn't fight for the stuff Jesus talks about. They fight for the stuff conservative Christians prioritize.
I mean,
okay, let me bring
Jesus bans
Andrew.
executions, yes.
Let me bring Andrew in here. Andrew.
Yeah, so the thing is funny is like he keeps on citing Israel as though that has not become a much more secular nation. There are Orthodox Jews who fight over abortion all the time.
Religion.
All the time, Orthodox Jews fight over abortion because of the idea of ensoulment, sir. And what does your Catholic dogma say about ensoulment? What does it say? Your Catholic dogma, you, the self-described Catholic, what does your dogma say about the ensoulment of a fetus? Can you tell me?
I was raised Catholic, sir, but my church is
answer my
against the teachings
question.
of Christ on many areas.
Answer my question. What does the dogma?
Does God?
What does the dogma of the Catholic Church, which you described yourself as
Catholic
a quote,
Church
progressive
says,
Catholic?
The Catholic Church says conception. The Bible says first breath. My point here is that the Bible does not ban it.
Catholic who
Y'all
doesn't
have
believe in your dogma.
prioritized something the Bible never forbids, and you vote and legislate against the stuff Christ actually talked about.
So let me get this right.
You're
a progressive.
Does God, Andrew,
you're a
let me
progressive
ask you a
Catholic
question
that
back.
doesn't believe in your own dogma.
Andrew,
is that right? You don't believe in your own dogma?
I don't really know if the
as a
Pope would consider me a
progressive
Catholic anymore. No, I think the church is wrong about a lot of things, Andrew. Some of us go beyond it.
Progressive Catholic. Why?
Because that's how I was raised. Let me ask you a question.
Catholic.
Andrew.
Because you were trying to give credibility to a Democrat. That's why.
Andrew, does God knowingly ensoul fetuses that he knows are going to be aborted?
According to Catholic dogma, yes.
Jeremiah,
so God puts a soul in a baby that he knows is going to be. So God puts a soul in a baby that he knows will be aborted.
Do you realize that by your logic, you would be denying the omnipotence of God, that God does not know you're going to die before you die? Do you believe that? You just said Jesus Christ is God.
I'm not denying that at all. I'm asking you, does God put a soul? Does God put a soul in a fetus that he knows is going to be aborted?
Hang on. I want to ask John a question, just to round things off here, because we mentioned Charlie Kirk a lot. I watched a lot of the Charlie Kirk service, and I found a lot of it profoundly moving, I have to say. Not least of all, the crowd themselves. I did not get the feeling I was at some, full-on political rally. Trump did what Trump does, and he obviously made some of it political. But actually, most of the speakers, as I think Isabel said, really talked up other things that Charlie Kirk stood for. But the overriding feeling I got was of a religious ceremony here, paying tribute to somebody who, at the forefront of everything he stood for, was his Christian faith. And the one thing I can absolutely guarantee, as a consequence of the brutal murder of Charlie Kirk, is that I think there will be a definite increase in the number of young people identifying as Christians, and they will probably identify as Christian conservatives. I mean, that, John, I think is almost an inevitable consequence of what happened. What do you think?
I don't care what they call themselves. I wish Christians would follow, believe in, and fight for the things Jesus actually talked about, as opposed to the things conservative Christians have been groomed to fight for and prioritize, which often have nothing to do with the teachings of Christ. There is no Jesus-based defense of Donald Trump support. You look at immigration alone, you have to reject God of the entire Old Testament, who commanded us to treat the alien as one of our own. You have to reject Jesus, who said that you have to who said that the way you treat the immigrant is the way you treat him. I need someone to explain to me why Donald Trump's right and God and Jesus are wrong. I don't care how people identify.
Okay,
I love many conservative Christians, and I'm not talking about the conservatives. I'm talking about the right-wingers.
All right, hang on, Andrew, explain that.
Logic. Yeah, it's the same exact logic that he used when he was raising money for Kamala Harris, who said we have to have secure borders, told Guatemalans can't come into the nation, and said, quote, I did this now as justification because otherwise I would look like a hypocrite, because she was the lesser of two evils. We can use the exact same argument.
Yeah.
The exact same argument. It's the lesser of two evils to have a wide open border where human trafficking can occur.
No one called for a wide open border. No one called for that. You're bearing false witness.
You did. You said the religious refugees. We should look at them as religious refugees and just be totally
Jesus calls for an open border, yes.
That's what you said we should do and how Christians should behave.
God called for an open border, and Ronald Reagan called for an open border and amnesty.
Because, sir, you're a hypocrite.
I haven't
the very thing you accuse us of.
No, I'm not.
You yourself did.
Why is Jesus wrong about the border,
Kamala Harris, who had the same,
Why is Jesus wrong?
Border policies.
Dude, she was going to hurt less people, and it's been proven, by the way.
No, she would have hurt more people with human trafficking.
That would be alive if USA...
Hang on. Hang on.
She would have hurt
more the thing about the border,
the
thing about the border debate which makes me laugh. Today, 2 clips have gone viral on X. And it's of Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton both talking about the southern border in a way that today, the woke left would describe as speaking in a fascist way about illegal immigrants. And that just shows me there's a lot of hypocrisy.
The left called them that back in the 90s, Piers.
A lot of hypocrisy on all sides, but
back in the 90s.
It certainly used to be the norm for Democrat leaders to talk in a way that they now pretend is talking like a fascist, which doesn't reflect...
And Ronald Reagan called for amnesty and open borders, Piers. It's gone back and forth.
Ronald Reagan also said a country without a strong border is not a country.
He didn't call for open borders.
But Ronald Reagan gave
about?
He did call for open borders. Ronald Reagan's argument was, let him come over here and work.
He didn't.
Reagan also said if there's open borders...
What?
Piers, your viewers can Google this. Reagan said when they're done working here, they can go back home.
John, Reagan literally said,
that's not
if a country doesn't have a strong border, it's not a country, right?
Yes.
That is not
Reagan used the term, and Reagan gave amnesty to millions. My question is, why is Donald Trump right and God and Jesus are wrong?
Well, if you ask Trump, it's because...
Why is Kamala right and God and Jesus are wrong?
No, you're not answering the question, Andrew. Why are God and Jesus wrong on abortion?
First of all,
I'm not a Democrat, bro. It's not going to hurt me.
Abortion is very, very clearly outlined in both Catholic Church and Orthodox
All right, let's not get back into that.
Let's not get back into bad news for you.
We've done the abortion debate. I want to end, Isabel, by asking you, when you saw Erica Kirk and her address at her husband's memorial, I mean, I got a sense of somebody feeling a very, very strong conviction to take over from him and becoming almost immediately an incredibly powerful advocate, actually, for the Christian conservative right.
I think you're exactly right, Piers. You know, many people are saying that perhaps no one influenced the culture of young men over the past decade as much as Charlie Kirk. I wholeheartedly agree with that. In returning to traditional masculinity and embracing objective truth and submitting to God in a culture telling you that your faith is oppressive in some way. Now there's this new frontier in the culture war conversation with young women where the angry leftist feminist rhetoric that has just destroyed women's happiness over my lifetime in America is starting to lose its shackle on young women. I think Erica Kirk is really becoming a powerful voice for godliness, for morality, for forgiving of your enemies, for embracing a soft femininity. I'm incredibly excited to see her in this new role at Turning Point USA.
And I have to descend by saying that as an Irish Catholic myself, it was very noticeable to me that whether you're on the American Christian right or the American Christian left, in the end, actually God decided it would be an Irishman that would win the Ryder Cup. So there you go. And there's nothing that any of you guys could do about it.
Glad he's weighing in on something.
Nothing you can do about it.
Glad he's weighing in on something, yes.
The prayers of the Europeans.
I bet those blessings make you see better.